Hello everybody, continuing part 2 of the MTC Corporation and the information on them and that they run private prisons and everything. And we're continuing off of Wikipedia webpage.org. So we're going off the reported incidents of violence, abuse, and poor conditions. Low security Eagle Mountain Community Correctional Facility in Eagle Mountain, California on October 25, 2003. A 90-minute prison race riot erupted. Some 150 mostly Latino prisoners attacked black inmates with meat cleavers, kitchen knives, broom handles, rocks, pipes, crutches, and fire extinguishers. The private guards retreated while state correctional officers were called in from distant state facilities. 2 inmates were stabbed to death. 7 others were critically injured, and dozens more were hurt. 8 short-term inmates were ultimately charged with and convicted of murder. The facility was closed by the end of the year. Willinsey Detention Center in Raymondville, Texas, in November 2007, 4 MTC employees were charged for using company vehicles to smuggle illegal immigrants through checkpoints. They were allegedly caught smuggling 28 illegal immigrants through the U.S. Border Patrol's Sarita checkpoint, approximately 100 miles north of Brownsville. The immigrants were from Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Arizona State Prison Kingman. On 30th of July 2010, 3 prisoners convicted of a homicide escaped after MTC workers ignored alarms indicating a breached fence. 2 MTC employees resigned afterward, a unit warden and a unit security chief. On September 20th, the Arizona Department of Corrections reported the escape went undetected for an unknown period of time because the security system between the perimeter fences, which should have detected the prisoners passing through, had been incorrectly installed, and it had not worked properly for the previous 2.5 years. One escapee was captured 28 hours later after a shootout with law enforcement in Rifle, Colorado. He was eventually sentenced to 48 years in the Colorado prison system. The other 2 prisoners and their accomplice robbed, hijacked, and kidnapped 2 truck drivers. 3 days later, the ringleader hijacked, kidnapped, and killed and incinerated 2 vacationers in New Mexico. He and his fellow escapee and their accomplice were captured within 20 days. The 2 escapees are now serving life terms in federal prisons. Kidnapping across state lines is a federal crime, and their accomplices were sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Subsequently, Arizona corrections officials stopped sending new inmates to the facility, which they said was dysfunctional. MTC threatened to sue the state for breach of contract, which had guaranteed the facility 97% occupancy, and for the loss of $10 million in revenue from empty beds. The state renegotiated the contract and paid MTC $3 million. Willinsey Detention Facility in Texas on June 22nd, 2011, MTC security officer Evan Rodriguez was arrested and subsequently charged with the sexual abuse of a female detainee. Diboll Correctional Center in Texas. In July 2014, a portion of internal ceiling collapsed in a day room. A number of inmates were taken to the hospital, where one was listed as being in critical condition. Walnut Grove Correctional Facility in Mississippi. MTC was awarded the contract for this facility after the state canceled that of Geo Group in the summer of 2012. East Mississippi Correctional Facility, EMCF, the state prison for prisoners with mental illness in 2013. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against the prison of MTC for intolerable conditions. The ACLU described this as an extremely dangerous facility where basic human rights are being violated daily. Many prisoners had reported being unable to access appropriate medical care, even for life-threatening conditions. The federal trial in 2018 had been the scene of testimony from numerous prisoners of abuse, killing, suicide, and neglect at this facility. In November 2014, MTC was named along numerous private firms and corruption charges during the arraignment of Mississippi Corrections Commissioner Christopher Epps, who was charged with receiving $1.9 million in bribes in exchange for lucrative contracts to private prison and subcontractor firms. Had ties to Cecil McCrory, a Republican former state legislator. According to the indictment, the bribes occurred as the East Mississippi Correctional Facility was descending into hellish chaos with gang violence routine, medical care substandard, and corruption rampant among corrections officers. On February 25, 2015, Epps pleaded guilty to tax evasion and taking bribes. He took about $2 million in exchange for prison contracts. After Epps was indicted, Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant quickly ordered renegotiation of the $60 million MTC contract to operate 3 state prisons: Walnut Grove Correctional Facility, East Mississippi Correctional Facility, and the Marshall County Correctional Facility, and a 4th, Wilkinson Country Correctional Facility, which had been managed by Corrections Corporation of America, now known as CoreCivic, all of which involved McCrory and Epps. MTC had been sued for mistreatment of inmates in 2 of those prisons. After his indictment, McCrory had a first plea bargain to lesser federal charges. Before being hired as a consultant by MTC, he had begun working as a consultant to Cornell Companies and GEO, which had paid him $10,000 monthly. MTC subsequently won all 4 contracts and hired McCrory as a consultant. Upon the disclosure of the federal charges, MTC fired McCrory, claiming that they knew nothing of his criminal activities. According to the indictments, MTC confirmed that it paid McCrory $12,000 a month and had hired him at Epps' recommendation. The company stated Epps had not forced it to hire McCrory. MTC's spokesman Issa Arnita said that Epps made us aware of the fee McCrory had charged in the past to other contractors and had worked for the GEO Group, the Boca Raton, Florida profit prison firm which had held the contracts that were subsequently awarded to MTC. MTC denied any knowledge of the alleged inappropriate relationships between Epps and McCrory. The indictment recounts a 2012 conversation quoting Epps telling McCrory that he had persuaded MTC to hire him, with them to split MTC's payments after taxes. The indictment has Epps saying, "I got us $12,000 per month." Epps was originally scheduled to be sentenced on June 9, 2015, but on June 8, federal authorities first announced that the sentence was indefinitely delayed. McCrory, co-defendant in the Epps case, moved to withdraw his guilty plea and had a trial scheduled consequently. The sentencing of Epps was again postponed, and the sentencing was delayed by the judge to allow defense lawyers additional time to review materials concerning how much money was gained by 15 corporations paying bribes to the pair. Prosecutors hoped to use the evidence to increase and recommend prison sentences for Epps and McCrory. On May 25th, 2017, Judge Wingate sentenced Epps to 235 months, 19.6 years federal prison. Wingate, who was appointed to the federal bench in 1985, said, "This is the largest graft operation that I've certainly have seen, and I have seen a lot." Wingate cited the Flowood incident as the reason why he gave a sentence that was longer than the 13 years recommended by prosecutors. By July 2017, Epps was moved to Federal Correction Institution, Seogoville, in Seogoville, Texas. Although Epps' sentencing was delayed, Wingate had sent sentencing for his co-defendant McCrory on December 21st to 22nd. On December 21st, 2016, Judge Wingate rejected McCrory's request to withdraw his plea and sent a new date for sentencing. The FBI testified that McCrory had admitted to their first interview with him laundering $40,000 in cash for Epps, and that he began wearing a recording device for his conversation with Epps. McCrory was free on bail and was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison on February 2nd, 2017. As of December 17, 2017, McCrory was being held at the Federal Correction Institution, Tullahgia, Alabama, with an anticipated release date of April 24th, 2025. In mid-June 2016, in the face of declining prison populations and the removal of juveniles to more suitable facilities, the state announced it would close the Walnut Grove Correctional Facility. This was accomplished on September 16, 2016. It was anticipated to have a devastating effect on the local rural and small town economy. Arizona State Prison kingman on January 19, 2015, 23-year-old inmate Nell Early died in a hospital in Las Vegas after being sexually assaulted and fatally assaulted in the MTC-operated prison located in Golden Valley, Arizona. A search there found numerous weapons, illegal cell phones, and a quantity of heroin. A guard working a 16-hour shift had been supervising 200 inmates at the time of the attack on Early. Early's parents filed suit for millions against the state, MTC, and a prison medical provider, alleging medical intervention had been delayed after Early had been found beaten and sexually assaulted. In other words, they waited before they put him to the hospital. Willacy and Country Correctional Center, Tent Prison, Willacy County, Texas, on February 21st, 2015. Nearly 2,000 inmates rioted over issues such as poor medical care. The prison was rendered inhabitable according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which had contracted with MTC to manage 2,800 inmates. Intervention by federal, state, and local law enforcement was required to suppress the riot. The Federal Bureau of Prisons soon removed some 570 inmates. MTC informed the state that all of its employees would be laid off on March 9, 2015. In March 2015, the bonds that paid for the construction of the prison were lowered to junk status by Standard & Poor's. At the time of the closing, the bond debt balance was about $128 million, and annual payments due for the bond debt was about $8 million a year. Alright, we'll continue the rest of this in part 3. This will be the end of part 2.